today's video we're gonna assemble and paint one of my best-selling items, a full-scale replica of a Claymore mine, fully non-operational, but it looks really good as a display piece or cosplay piece, however you want to use it. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and take a look at all the pieces, clean those up, and then prep them for paint. So here we are at the cleanup station. This is where I remove supports. So when you're removing supports, there's three tools that I consider a must. A deburring tool, nippers, and needle nose pliers. Now we'll go over what each one is used for as we go through the process. So firstly, I use the deburring tool. That's just to kind of get all the little things that hang off. And just kind of rub it along the edges, wherever you think there's parts that need to be taken off. It's just the easiest way to take it off. Just kind of push it against it in that curve and pull back. It's just that easy. Now, next part, sometimes this gets a little tricky. I break off any parts that aren't needed. Get in there. And then you have your supports. So needle nose pliers are usually good to go. As you can see, if you have your settings correctly, which I will have a video on eventually, they peel right off. And that's how supports should be. They should just peel right off. You're going to have areas that are a little sticky. You go ahead and fight with it a little more until you get it to where you need it to be. Now, these supports did leave some rough areas. I'll show you how to take care of that in a minute here. And then the next thing, once the supports are removed, go ahead with the old deburrer. Deburr around the edges. And there you go. Like I said, we'll get to cleaning that up in a moment. And then here's another piece. This one's fairly easy. All the supports just peel right off on this. And when they peel off like that, like I said, that means your settings are good. And go ahead and peel them off. And grab your deburrer around the edges. That just helps smooth it out and make it look nice for when you paint. Go. And then these parts here I do without supports, but they do have a little nub on the end. That's where your nippers can come in. Pretty handy. And this is just the prep stage, so we're trying to get it to look nice for when we paint it. So it doesn't have to be perfect right away, because we will make it perfect in a moment. These parts, supports have already been removed, but I'll show you. Oh, got three. Here's one where they are not removed. So this is a perfect example of not having your settings correct with supports. And side note, I prefer tree supports. These are regular supports in Bamboo Studios. As you can see, they just don't come off as nice and clean. But I wanted to use this as an example to show you guys what it looks like when your settings aren't right. You could see it's a little sticky, it's stuck, and you got a little residue. But I'll show you how to take care of that. Go ahead and grab just a hobby blade. Be careful. and cut away from yourself. Go ahead and kind of scrape that off. Be careful not to break the piece. In future videos I will show how to repair broken pieces without super glue. I personally don't use a lot of super glue. I use what's called plastic welding, and we're going to get into that in a moment. And then here's some more pieces that are tree supports. I mean, as you can see, there's a huge difference. Peels right off. And then as far as prep work, in this part of the procedure, so these are the legs for the Claymore. So I would just take this, make sure it's facing the right way, and it slides right on. And these Claymores are of my design. I took a lot of work to get the legs correct, to work correctly, so they swivel and fold like the real deal, and correct markings front and back. The detonator caps are correct. The clacker remote detonator is correct with correct markings. So there we go with these are the legs. And what I'll do is I'll drill holes in the right area, and these will sit in there and they'll be able to swivel and fold just like the real deal. And the detonator caps fit into there, and as you can see, correct markings back and front. Same with the clacker remote detonator, and this top goes on here. So next we'll go into the drilling and assembling and plastic welding. So for the next step, what I do is all the drilling. As you can see, I have a bunch to do, but I just wanted to use one as an example for this video. So first thing I do, as I spoke of before, is I find the proper area for the holes for the legs and drill one in each area, and then I dry fit it, press the legs, and I see that one, okay, it's fitting okay now. And then I make sure they can fold proper. They will swivel as needed, move as needed, stand like the real deal. There we go. You guys get the gist of it. Like I said, this is just the initial build phases. And then after that, I drill out the hole for the hinge in the Claymore or a clacker. Just bore it out a little bit. And then over here they have these holes that would be screw holes on the real deal, but also on the real deal they're waterproof. So I'll show you how I create that effect. I drill out these 3 holes. See, that broke. So sometimes you can plastic weld that, but I prefer not to, as it just creates a nasty seam. I think I have another one.
And here we go with the airbrushing. First thing I generally do is I run a little bit of alcohol through my airbrush. It's not really necessary, but it just ensures that there's no clogs and everything's going to flow correctly from the get-go. There are airbrush cleaners and things made specifically for airbrushing, but I prefer alcohol. It dries fast. It definitely is cheaper. So the same thing would apply with airbrush cleaner. You know, just put a little bit in there before you start airbrushing, and go ahead and make sure it's cleaned out, everything's flowing properly. That way when you start, you don't have any issues. Then once you do that, you go ahead and set the needle just so it's just peeking out, and put the lock in. There's a lock on the back that locks the needle in place. And then once you do that, I have a custom mix for this green, this olive green. Go ahead and get your paint, put it in the pot of your airbrush. Now, there's a lot of different opinions on consistency of paint. I say the consistency of about milk. This kind of just gives you an idea. You want it to flow, but not be too watery. Reason being is, number one, it flows correctly, it comes out correctly, covers correctly. And then if it's too thin, it doesn't cover correct, it takes forever to dry, and you have to do double the coats. So once I mix up my paint, make sure I got a decent consistency, I go ahead and fill the pot, and then I put a little, usually it's alcohol, sometimes I use water, but I just put a touch in the top. Mix it in with the paint. I always have a rag on hand, so then I take my rag and spray lightly into it. Then it mixes in the pot, mixes the alcohol and the paint, and you can see on the rag how your flow is going. And if you're happy with the flow, go ahead and paint. So one thing I wanted to touch on is, you can see that these are black. So when you print in black, generally you don't, in my personal opinion, my experience, generally when you print in black and you go to paint, you don't need to put a primer or anything on. The black creates natural shadows, as you'll see in a minute, and it really is unnecessary to put anything on it. In my opinion, my experience. You may come to a different opinion. There are times where primers and stuff do come in handy to fill gaps, but we'll touch on that in other videos. So this is a little bit lighter. It's gray. Gray can sometimes be hard to paint over. So in that instance, here's what I do. I go ahead and get some black. Once again, this is my own custom blend. Just pour the black in there. Spray through. It'll spray your previous color, which is okay. You can always paint over it if need be. I just like to get it flowing, because that kind of acts as a primer,
in a sense. You'll see the color change. There we go. More of a black. So I go ahead and paint all those lighter areas with black. This way, once it dries, I'll go over it again with the green, and those, as I said, the natural shadows will already be there. So I just go ahead and coat the whole thing in black. That way none of that lighter color shows through when it's time to paint. It just makes things a little bit, actually a lot easier for you. Go ahead and make sure it's all covered. When doing this, you can't be afraid to get a little messy. It's just the nature of the beast. And one trick I do use if I want to dry it quicker, I go ahead and use a hair dryer. Just cheap hair dryer. You're going to blow things all over the place. That's dry enough, because the rest of it will dry as I paint this. So I go ahead and I have this little pot that I use. I call it my dump pot. Go ahead and when I'm switching colors, sometimes it's a little tight. Plan B. So it's a little tight. I only have two hands. So what I do is I dump the old paint back into the container. Waste not, want not. Then I just take some water and rinse out the pot. Spray it a little bit. Let it clean off that needle. And you're ready for the next color. Which, let's go ahead, move that out of my way so I don't knock it over. I've been known to do things of that nature. Get a little green. Just a touch of alcohol. Grab the rag. Make sure it's flowing. Okay, now we're going to airbrush these pieces. First things first, always wear a respirator. Make sure you have proper ventilation as well. That helps immensely. Now I prefer matte paints. It makes it look a little more realistic. These are not shiny when you get them. As for clear coat, this is the clear coat I use. It seals and protects the paint. So what I do is paint it, get it everywhere, wherever I need it, paint all the details, weather it, and then I spray a coat of matte clear on it. That way it protects the paint. It doesn't get scratched up during shipping and packing and whatnot. And it just lasts longer. So the body is done. So then we insert the legs. And go ahead and test them. Make sure they sit well. And there's the finished Claymore. So the last step on this is the
details on the clacker. Well, second to last step. So I go ahead and get a palette. I don't use fancy palettes, just any cheap palette, good enough for me. Sometimes I just use cardboard for palettes. I just use paint. And this little part here is the cover for where the wires go in on the real deal. So I just go ahead and paint around that. On more intricate things I will mask it off, but this I can do it freehand. And then once it's blocked off, so to speak, just go ahead and paint the whole thing black. Put it on fairly thick. That way I can push it around as needed. Get it smooth as possible. These brushes, these smaller brushes don't hold a lot of paint, so I tend to put it on thick and spread it. Works out well. And then the little button inside of there, that's also black. So just go ahead and paint that black. And little nub in here. Paint that black. Paint that black, show some wear. And we will call that done. Claymore and Clacker 1/1 scale replica.